Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday afternoon here on Kobold Press. It is a holiday week, y'all. I hope that if you are tuning in, you are doing it from the sterile comfort of your home, in pajamas and comfy pants. If you're not, well, I hope you get there because that's where I'm headed after this. After this show marks my official done point through the holidays for Kobold Press. But I'm so glad that you're joining us. We have two incredible guests today, two people that I hold near and dear to my heart for very different reasons. And I'm very excited to pick their brains and hear about what tactics and processes they use for GMing, because their shows, their tables, their podcasts are simply some of the best in my opinion. So I want to welcome Tall and Persephone. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to give you a chance to actually introduce yourself. And since on my left is Sephi, you're up first.
Hello, I'm Persephone, or Sephi, or Persephiroth. I am the DM of Fast Times at D&D High. I was Sam Nightingale on Dimension 20 as the 7. I do a lot of Pokemon streams, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So, yeah, I was at one point a forever DM, and now I sort of split my time between DMing and playing. So.
Oh, that might be a good question. We'll have to talk about that, because I was also, too, a forever GM for a while, and then I was like, but I want to play. So, that's a hole that a lot of us fall into.
Yeah, it is. Definitely is.
All right, tell us who you are in case people in chat don't know.
I am Tallsquall, and you can find me on Tuesdays for Tabletop Tuesdays, where currently we're running Last Voyage of the Whale's Whiskers. We'll be going into Season 2 here, starting up again in January. Before that, I was the DM for The Vice, which was a big 4-year campaign, 140 sessions, weekly thing that we used to do on Saturdays. And it was one of those great things. It was one of the long campaigns that we actually landed the story, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, you can see me there or all over the Twitters, filling you with D&D fitness stuff, random Ace Pride stuff, and just hopefully bring a little real light to your day.
Yeah.
Probably a little politics too these days. I'm trying to not be so bad about it.
Look, I think we're all trying, but there are just some things that we can't avoid.
Hey, your space on the internet to say whatever the fuck you want.
Yes.
Well, and I realize as a white male, I have a voice that can hopefully help change some things. So yeah. I'm trying to use that to elevate other people's voices who need to be heard more. So.
Very nice. Well, I am, like I said, over the moon to have the both of you here. It's kind of it was so funny when I started reaching out to GMs to come on. I had a deep hope that the two of you would end up on the same date, and serendipitously, it did end up that way. So it was a really exciting thing for me. Now, I know that obviously both of you have been in this industry or business and doing this for a while, but I always love to start with how did you get started in tabletop games? We all have that Genesis story. Where did you start?
Do you want first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I've been playing tabletop games for 16 years. And I'm only 18, so yeah. It's great. It's fine. Too. I've been playing since I was 2 years old. But no, I started in high school with this rinky-dink little gaming club. I was in there for a very short period of time, and then my friends started playing, and after that I was gaming with the same group for about 12 years. It only ended when the pandemic did. When the pandemic started, I was with that group from that time on. And then I didn't run games, though, until it'll be 3 years in January since I first started running my games. And I sort of just took it and ran. And I started 1 year offline, and then I went immediately online. And I've been ever since.
Nice. What about you, Tall?
Well, let's see. If you count all my fun times in high school with Steve Jackson games, which was 34 years ago, but I'm only 18 as well. And but there's a 20-year gap in there because I played 2E. Second edition, right when it first came out, when I was in college, but then got pulled into career and everything like that for nearly 2 decades, and didn't really revisit coming back to 5th edition back in late 2015, early 2016 time frame is kind of when I rediscovered it. Actually, strangely enough, through my cosplay things that I was doing at the time, because it was when Critical Role released their cosplay intro, when they did the new intro where they were all dressed up for campaign 1, and it made its way around the cosplay community because how good the costumes were. And I was like, what is this? I was like, D&D? I haven't played D&D in 20 years. And so I was like, let me see what this is all about. And I mean, it was immediate of just like, I got to go back and start doing this again because of how much I loved it and telling stories. You know?
Wow, I feel lucky. That was about the time I came into the online space too. So our paths crossed at like another serendipitous moment.
Yeah.
So crazy. So crazy. So, you've both been playing for a while, but I think you brought up an interesting point, which is like that transition. And we were kind of talking about this backstage, and I'll just kick off with this question then. So you transitioned from being a player to a GM, and then you said that, Steffi, that you were kind of now a forever GM, and then you kind of gone back to playing now. What does that whole look like,
It's very weird because for the longest time I thought I couldn't run games. I thought I wouldn't be good at it. I mean, I was a writer and stuff, but I didn't think I'd be good at the performance aspect. And once I started running games, like, I come from a LARP background, and like a lot of my close friends in the area were LARPers. And as soon as like people heard that I was running games, like people would talk about how good they were. Not to toot my own horn, but that's how it happened. People would be asking me to run games for them. And I, being naive and easily taken advantage of, was like, yeah, sure. So I started, I ran one game, and then all of a sudden I was running 4 long-term campaigns before I knew it, and not playing anything.
Yeah.
But when I started Fast Times, and I started doing more stuff, Fast Times is my podcast, Fast Times at D&D High, I started getting asked to play more. And GM too. Like I GM'd for Chaos Initiative for on the official Dungeons and Dragons channel, like for a little bit. I did like a couple of sessions for that and like other places, but people were asking me to be in their games. And then I started playing in a lot of places, so people kept asking me to play. So now I'm like, since the podcast is on hiatus, episodes and stuff, like I'm just playing at this point.
That's kind of a refreshing feel too, to just like be able to show up and like live in the moment.
I mean, it is, but I really, 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 really miss running games. I love running games. I have severe ADHD, like actually diagnosed, and character ADHD on top of that. So it's fun to jump between characters.
Yeah, I feel that. I tell people I'm a NPC GM. Like I love nothing more than to just like play NPCs at the table. Same. So I definitely feel that. Now, Tal, you have been obviously like 140 sessions. That's no small feat as a GM. But you've done a lot of playing too. What is your balance like between GM to player?
Well, it actually was pretty even because, during the Encounter Roleplay days, I mean, where we first met each other, I was running the Vice on Saturdays, but I'd usually have 1 or 2 games during the week that I would play. So I was, about that 50-50 range, maybe even playing a little bit more than I was DMing, other than fact, I'm one of those crazy DMs who does like a bazillion hours of prep before every session.
We're going to talk about everybody's process because... you both do a ton of prep, which is so funny because the majority of the people I've interviewed do not. So I very much look forward to your prep.
You mean the smart ones? The smart ones?
I mean,
you had a whole show get dedicated to your prep, Tal. I remember that.
So I basically was about 50-50 there for a while. And then, as the pandemic came on and the Vice ended in June of 2020. So that was when we wrapped it, because that was truly where it was needed. We were at the end of the story. And then had a little bit of a hiatus, but then got back into it. Just really wanted to start running again. So back fall of this last year, I ran first the Hollowed, and then Whale's Whiskers, and then now Whale's Whiskers again. And then I'll be playing in just a home game with James Intricasso and some of those folks. We're going to play Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which I'm so excited. I didn't buy the book or anything because I was like, I don't want to know anything about this because I want to play this one.
Play in it.
I'm making a Blood Hunter Haragon, and I cannot.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like very Watership Downs, the Bad Bunnies type idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like his background. I can't wait.
That's actually a really great comment there in chat. I'll read this too. I feel like I prep way too much. I want to get better at prepping less. It is a science. I wonder how much of a science is it? I mean, let's actually talk about what does prep look like for both of you. Because, Sephi, I know you've got the podcast, even though you're on a hiatus now, but that was a big thing for you. And you were saying you're running 4 games at one time. And Tal, I've watched your GM prep sessions a few times online. So I know what it looks like. But it's a balancing act of like what is too much, what's too little. So what does your process look like as you begin to prep for a new campaign or just a session?
Oh Lord. So the funny thing is that so here's the thing about prep when it comes to GMing. No matter what, you're gonna end up improving like more than half of what you have. Like you can prep to the 9s and still have to be like, oh, players went in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Throw this away, throw that away, throw this away. And like, I'm fine with that. Like the prep for me is mostly so that I feel grounded and that I feel like I have the responses necessary and I know the grounding of the world and what I think they're going to go for. It gives more context for the world, like in the NPC performances that I give. So like, I do a lot of lore prep. I do a lot of monster prep, obviously, like monster creation, stuff like that. But a lot of it is just like sometimes I'll prep descriptions if I really, really, really want to nail them and I'm worried that I won't get on the fly.
Yep.
Like stuff like that. But for a large part, it's like there's a reason these are mostly improv games because like the thing with like good improv is that you always have a grounding note or something in it. And that's what prep is for me, is getting that grounding, sometimes more than others. But yeah, Fast Times, I have enough written on that game to publish a book on it.
Wow. Okay, well, we're going to talk about that too because world building is something I think you're both really brilliant at. So I would definitely like to dive into that. What about you, Tal? I mean, what does your process look like for a session or like a regular run of a show?
I love the term you used, which was lore prep. And I think that is sort of my biggest piece is that same thing. The more I am familiar with the world, and whether it be the region, the city, the faction, whatever that might be coming into play, almost, I don't want to say irregardless of what the players do, but there's it's not your they usually can't hop and skip and jump completely across the world. Certainly at lower levels, you don't have to worry as much about that. But the more grounded you are in, hey, they're going into this part of the world. What's driving this part of the world? Is this a wealthy area? Is it a poor area? Does it have lots of traders? Does it have are they used to visitors? Are they not used to visitors? What's the local crisis? Because so there's always a local crisis, and and those are things that you can do. And a lot of the D&D books even do it is like, hey, it's almost like having a random table of like, here's like 3 or 4 random local crisis that whether it happens in Eastville or Westville doesn't really matter. It's that it's the farmer's horse ran away because there's a goblin on the loose. I mean, something like that. You can transplant pretty easily, especially for those times when your players go in an odd direction and maybe not along a true kind of like canon story path that you're trying to build. That you can still have something interesting for them to do. That while you then have the gap between sessions to try to modify or get them back on the track or go a whole new direction. I mean, my biggest favorite sort of world building prep stories, my big bad in my 140 session campaign got killed in about session 80.
Hey,
and it was supposed to be a look-see of here's this, they had been having this set series of building encounters with this big bad, and the time when I did not think they were have a chance to make it to even have that encounter. They just have the aftermath of the encounter. They came up with a way to get there, and then instead of, they were like, we're doing this. Like, we're doing it.
We're doing
this
it.
Is
it's gonna happen.
Absolutely. We're either gonna it's gonna be a TPK and it's gonna be brilliant, or you're gonna kill him and it's gonna be brilliant. And it literally came down to like a last die roll, and it was great. And I mean, it's still one of the best things ever. And it, stuff like that, it's not campaign ending. So you got to go with it,
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you just got to be grounded. If you're grounded in your world, and I know there's a question here about the world.
Yeah, we're going to get
there.
there.
If you're grounded in your world and, as you say, do that lore prep. I'm going to use that so often now. Like, you can do almost anything.
Yeah.
And it will sound true to your campaign.
Yeah. And it's also like, I'd say like knowing the world is like more important. Like I do NPC prep too, but a lot of the NPCs that the players get attached to or want to appear more often are the ones that are just like, oh, I have to create someone on the fly. And oftentimes those are the most like grounded NPCs for some reason, because they're just thought of on the fly and they are created from the response with the player and built that way, which can often feel like players contribute to like creating the world, and like certain things they do may change the world and reaction stuff. Like there's no good tables without a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
So there should always be space for that. But like the more you know about the world and the general areas, or like even like what I used to do is I used to separate I used to think of sessions as chapters in a book or episodes of a TV show.
Oh.
And so I would have like, this is what could happen in this episode in like an outline. And like, not that I'm outlining the session, but I'd be like, this would be the major plot point.
Yeah.
That they can get to. They may not get to it, but this is the plot point that is going to happen no matter what. At some point, somehow they're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Having those that big bad's going to appear like in the middle of a session or something like that, stuff like that. Like, that no matter where they go, this thing's going to appear. So like stuff like that you can like firm up or like and focus on, those are things that you can always put in and like sort of transpose to whatever they do and react with it. But you definitely want to leave a lot of wiggle room for how those things come up, because it's not fun to feel railroaded. But,
no.
But don't leave it a sandbox either, because that's just going to be hell for you.
Yeah. And there's sort of this. There's sometimes people think that, oh, well, I can't railroad, so therefore I need to just have it be anything goes. And that's really, I mean, it can be fun for like a single session, but for a campaign where you want it to have a meaning and an arc and whatever, you need to have a little thing. I mean, something I used, what I called was destiny paths. And a good story can be made from both people fulfilling their destiny and also for failing at their destiny.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the
sometimes
big thing.
Failing's more interesting.
And actually, yes, I mean, having someone's destiny go awry is actually can be a even more compelling story than that big epiphany moment of fulfilling their destiny. And so one of the things I did with the Vice was, okay, if everything went right for this person, what would be their destiny? What would be the destiny if all the dice rolls went their way, if all the things fell into the right place? What is this person destined for?
Yeah.
And if things don't go so well, who does that destiny move on to?
Yeah.
Does it move on to a big bad? Does it move on to an NPC that they move along the way, that then they sort of realize that, oh, if I would have chosen differently, that could have been me, type idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A good example of what I think, how I like to plan my games or how I like them to feel is like Dragon Age Origins. Like, to use a video game example, like, you're going to go to X place, Y place, A, B, C, D, E, F, G place, but your choices matter, and your choices affect the path that happens and the events that happen and the lore that happens. So like that's sort of how I think of my games, is that a little less rigid than the structure of a video game, because there can be more stuff done on the fly, but like there's a story that you're building towards, and that story can change, but there's going to be parts that are known that I can deal with, that are sort of like, they're sort of like the rocks in a pond that you can skip to. Like you know that when you jump to this, you'll do this, but you don't know if you'll have to jump to this rock first or that rock first, or if this will be an extra long jump or something like that. That's sort of how I feel is a good way to respond to player stuff, because like obviously you want to be able, not necessarily to like force a narrative. You don't want to force a narrative ever, but like you want to make sure that what they've signed up for is going to get somewhere. Because like what I do whenever I have a campaign is, I'm very weird about this, I do one-page premise sheets with like slight summaries of the campaign, major themes, trigger warnings, like stuff like that. And then I'm like, this is what the overarching thing is. and like not necessarily giving stuff away, but like what the background of this campaign is, and then they work through that. And I want to make sure that they, get to do that because they've agreed to play that and they want to play that. But like getting there is going to be like, progress isn't linear,
Yeah, never.
I forget who said it, but someone said, a campaign needs to be like a river, and you can, the current is always flowing towards the major story, but the players have the option to go through the rapids, to go through the easy part, to even hop on the shore and walk alongside the river. But the current should always be flowing. You need to have some sort of a current of the story, and I think what Sevi was saying, can be so compelling. One of the rare things that we can do as DMs, in a video game, key NPC Bob is going to stand there in that doorway at the inn and be there, whether you show up there, if you sprint from the last destination to this one, or whether you go in side quest for 3 months and then
Bob's still standing there.
Still standing there. One of the big things that we can do is the world is moving.
Yeah,
and
the world changes and grows alongside him.
The world should be a player, and the DM as a player is part of that. And so if they go and play around the tavern and stay at the carnival and go do go woo and romance NPC over here, Bob's already gone, or he's hired someone else.
Yeah.
And and so then it's and you can let them, and you should let the players know that is like, oh yeah, there was some guy here about 2 weeks ago, he got a band of adventurers who went off to go take care of that. I've even done the very evil thing of they then go try to catch up, and they see adventurers like heading out with all the treasure.
Oh yeah.
And
I've
detect magic, he's got like a +3 sword he must have picked up in there.
I've done something similarly evil. This was an offline game, but players basically went to this temple that was like, it was sacred with butterflies. It was like a butterfly sanctuary, but also a temple.
Cool.
And the big bad evil empire had basically taken over the country that I was in, and were in the place. And one of the players got mad at the colonizers, and they were like, I want to attack them. I want to cast hold person on a level 20 paladin. I was like, okay. I had the stat block. I predicted. And it's like they made the choice to do that. And I was like, the butterfly sanctuary was going to survive, but then it burned to the ground.
Because they failed, yeah.
And they thought it was one of the priests who did it. So, priestesses. So they burned it to the ground. Players should have, there should be responses to, the things that they do.
Yeah, like consequences,
Oh, yeah.
Not just consequences. They can be happy. They can be sad. They can be, it's a reaction. And, reactions like that build investment. And it was sort of the moment where I was like, oh, I need to kill all these people. And that's when you get investment versus, immersion. And investment's more important to me.
Oh, interesting. I like that. Investment versus immersion.
There's only so much you can do with immersion. You can try to make things feel as real and visceral as possible with description, props, anything. But especially with online games, you want to get buy-in more than anything else.
Yeah, you want them to buy into the story. Because the immersion will happen when they do,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So both of you
they'll want to be immersed.
Yeah, they want to be immersed. Yeah, it's like the first step really is the investment piece. So both of you have these two homebrew worlds, the one for your podcast and the Vice. And Tall, you may have a new one now that I don't even know about. Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us about the worlds that you kind of created. I know one of them's completed, one of them's kind of not. You said you've got a tome worth of information on yours. What is the world of your podcast, or the world of the Vice?
Do you want me to go first?
I think
Tall should go. You should go first because you have gone first every time.
Okay.
I feel rude.
So one of the nice parts about this, I'm the same way. I literally at one point did the count of my notes, and it's I've got 150,000 words of notes
from
the Vice on the world. And the nice part is because of the way the world is built and the way we sort of touched on things, my two other both the Hollowed and Whale's Whiskers occur in the same world. So
okay.
It's one of the nice things is so that I don't have to rebuild a world every time. We're in different areas that I just sort of breezed against in the Vice. But in the Vice itself, the era that the Vice takes in, I mean, the big thing there was that magic was broken. Um, it had been a high magic world, not quite Eberron-esque, but getting close to that type of level. Trade was all done via teleportation
Oh.
network and all that type of stuff. And all that broke down. And suddenly you were back to a world that had been very used to magic. Now, relying on caravans and,
Mm.
learning how to navigate the land again. And, people, when you could go hop on a teleportation platform, pretty much anyone from within a half day's journey from their house could go anywhere in the world. It was almost like having airports, at everywhere, hop on and, hey, well, I'm across whatever. To suddenly not being able to do that.
Yeah.
And so that was the big piece there. And that had happened about 70 years prior to the time frame of that. So, it wasn't just that initial panic and post-apocalyptic, but it was kind of settling into the world of like, yeah, this is kind of what it's going to be like now.
Yeah, a generation has passed basically since the
Yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so lots of other things happening along with that, and sort of the explanations of that, and is there a way to fix it, blah blah blah, is the bigger arc and plot and destinies of the characters. But yeah, no, I mean, so that was sort of the premise of the Vice, and sort of what's going on in that world. And it all was the genesis off of actually my first 5e character, of me writing their backstory, of building this, of having to journey, sort of a pilgrimage that he was going on to go get this, follow a calling to become a paladin late in life after being a blacksmith for 40 years. So
cool.
Totally
That's
not
cool.
me. Yeah, it's totally not me.
Yeah,
at all.
totally not tall. Yeah.
It's not me at all. An engineer who suddenly is playing D&D all the time. No, it's not me at all. But like all of our first characters, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so that's my world. And then there's just lots of, lots of happenings that occurred around that, different factions that had arisen, taking it, both taking advantage of the fact that magic had broken and what that meant. And we had the rise of it. The Genasi were actually, in my world, created by this event that broke magic.
Uh-huh.
And so suddenly you had a new race that entered into the world. So we're actually, had a lot of talk with our cast along the way, because it was, this was 2016, before we were doing things like session zeros and things like that. But I mean, so much, we're such a better place now. But luckily, we were just a very open cast, and we always would talk sort of before and after to explore. I had a great player in NG9, Alicia. She's been on a, I'm not sure if she's been on.
Oh my God, Alicia is
so
amazing.
Good.
So good. She, I had played with her on, just literally met by random doing looking for group, D&D, which she was the first person I played 5e with online. And I asked her to come be a part of my world. I was like, well, tell me about your world. And I was like, well, here's what's going on. This is what's things. And she was like, can I play a Genasi? I want to tell the story of a Genasi, and being in this world where, at the very, when they first appeared, they were being born to every race could birth a Genasi. So you would have
interesting.
High elves suddenly give birth to a fire Genasi, or dwarves give birth to a Gyarados, or gnomes. And so in a world where magic is broken down with midwifery and stuff, I mean, the first reaction was, this is a cursed child.
Right.
And so, there was a really bad period where, Genasi that were being born were not surviving until they were starting to be born to nobility as well. And so, and then, of course, things begin to change, but that, those beliefs and those, now in these farming communities and these isolated communities, a lot of that prejudice, flat out, and racism against Genasi was still in place. And Alicia, in her brilliant style, helped us walk through that.
Yeah.
And eventually making, one of the big climactic moments was Genasi, was Alicia's character helping create a homeland for the Genasi. And it was, I mean, we all bald.
Yeah.
I mean, it was huge.
Alicia's amazing. She's actually one of the mods on my channel.
Oh, is she? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love her. Love her.
So,
Love her to pieces.
what about, because I think the worlds are both equally amazing, but very different. What about, for your podcast, where did you begin making that world?
Okay, so with the podcast world, it's actually like, so the world of Fast Times, it's called Cisternia, because it's called Cisternia because there are many holes of it that lead to other worlds and that sort of pour in like a cistern. So all the gods are from different areas, and no god is native to the area. They all came through these wandering pathways. But I really started with creating just the world, just the like country that the players are going to be in, and I started with the schools because so Fast Times at D&D High has 5 or 6 main schools. I should know off the top of my head, but each one of them has its own culture, its own focus. Some are magic, some are divinity, some are combat, mercenary, and or business. One school is both mercenary, business, and like just mercantile arts. It's very funny. Oh, and theater kids. And then there's like a dark arts school that's focused on mental health and making sure that people are safe when they're born into dark powers. And like, then there's the school for the fuck ups, which is where all the kids in the group project goes to, the main characters. It starts off with them getting basically expelled from their schools and having to go to Varnum Correctional Facility. But yeah, those schools were where I started building, and so before the game, I wrote out packets of information about each school, their culture, main NPCs, who the headmaster, headmistress, principal, whatever were, like who characters they would have known from these areas were, set it all up so that like these places were like living, breathing, they had descriptions, they had different areas, and then I blew them all out one by one at the onset of the game into a new school, into an entirely new environment. And that's sort of where I started the game. And like, after that, I started fleshing out the country of Arya, which is where they're all from. And Arya is the world of Fast Times. Every place is modern, but it's magical modern. So everything's fueled by magic. Like doctors use magic to treat patients, so on and so forth. But there's differing levels of that. Like the country that is the nearest border to Arya is Array, and Array has a orcish monarchy and is hyper modern, probably even more modern than Arya. But like the skyscrapers are made out of stone. The pathways are like highways are made out of enchanted wood, stuff like that. So like each country has its own deal and own thing. But I was very focused on creating the country that they're in because that's where I knew the campaign was going to take place. And the other ones are basically cultural standpoints that characters could come from. They might be characters from there. There was a war in the past that had involved a lot of these different countries and stuff. And like, they're going to get thrown into that eventually. Hint, hint. But like most of what they experience is going to be within Arya. It's the only world that I've built that way. I have another world that has not yet premiered online, but maybe soon, called Wrath of the Open Water, which is based entirely, every country is based off a different place or places from my ancestry. So there's places that are based off Scotland, Ireland, Wales, the Caribbean, the islands that my dad is from, Africa, Poland and Lithuania. Like all the different areas are based off places that I know are part of my bloodline and heritage. So like, it's how I build worlds and how I like sort of look and construct them is very different. Like the world of Cisternia very much was made for these characters and made for this experience. Whereas the world of Wrath of the Open Water was made for multiple campaigns. Each place has its own story, its own thing. I could run a campaign in any individual area, which is more like what Tallsquall has. So like, it all depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to pull from.
That's actually a really great segue into one of the questions that came up in chat. And we talked a little bit about creating lore, because both of you seem to think like lore is kind of that staple. It is the nail that holds it all down when you're prepping. But what about all these other things? Both of you have talked a lot about pantheons. You've talked a lot about ancient history. What is this was a question around should, but I say what goes into that? How much of that do you actually need when you go and you launch this?
I had very little of it that I think the lore was there for the era that I was sort of in, but a lot of the deep past sort of began to grow, especially at about what the players found themselves interested in. And it sort of pushed me to really think about and create some of that backstory, some of that world backstory of going on. I mean, I knew sort of, I'd call it the recent history of this. It had sort of been this high magic world and sort of where that began. But as far as the real deep lore wasn't until your players sort of start pushing you in those directions. Well, what's that about? Or, I like this idea of my character being from or invested or having spent time with this culture. What's their story? Okay, well, let me find it. Let me check my notes.
Let me check. Wink, wink, wink.
Yeah, and and then you start thinking about it, and just like when you start creating a character, I go there starting to write something about this one culture that someone has a question about, and it's like, okay, well then that should play off this and that would play off of that. And a lot of it can come from just, I mean, when you're creating NPCs, well, where's this NPC from? Well, okay, the whole premise of my world, the Viceroy's Highway is what it's named after, which the world everyone calls the Vice because it's a road through a dark forest. And I was like, I don't want to just have another Tolkien road through a dark forest. What's the story of this road? And I was like, well, let's make it perfectly straight. That it is like this perfectly straight road that has these towering like redwood trees on either side. So it's like you're down in almost like in Star Wars, going down that channel at in the Death Star, and that basically all the predators in the forest like are on the trees like picking off travelers because
that's the road.
That's the road, and it's we're the softest, squishiest thing around, right? Okay, so why is the road straight? Why is it there? What happened? And even from there, you start getting these nuggets of the this and then this and then this, and why is that and why is the other, and then then you start writing a book.
Yeah,
it just turns into if that was this and that was that, or I had a whole city that was just sort of almost like the city that they're from there. It was I want a merchant city. Well, I don't want to just be a merchant city. What's this very rich city that's off to wherever? Well, it's a city of the arts. It's where art is currency. Where your artistry is currency, that there is no that money is your art.
Does a city like that exist today? Can we go there, please?
Right? Yeah, can we live there, please?
I might actually. The name of it's Qualverine. It's like I need Qualverine.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and the Mosaic Palace, which is where the leader, the Grand Maestro of Qualverine.
That's so cool.
That is cool.
And yeah, there will be a campaign in Qualverine at some point.
I love that.
All my artistic friends.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
Yeah, sign us up.
Yeah, please.
What about you, Sephi? When it comes to these things like outside of lore, the pantheon, the details, you said you started with the schools, which I think is very interesting.
So I think to give some advice for how to do this, look at whatever you have or whatever you're interested in running as a campaign, and just go, why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Where did all this come from? Like, just keep questioning why, and you'll find the answers that you need.
Yeah.
And to just answer the question very quickly, you have as much or as little as you need to feel comfortable running for people. That's all you need. That's really that's all you need to start a game. But like, as far as like how these sort of things came to be, like I was very much like, with Fast Times, I was very much like, I want to run something for teenage characters, because I used to be like a YA writer. Don't look for my books; they're not published. Don't look for them. But just one thing that I knew well was like writing these sort of settings to go along with it. I was like, I wanted to involve D&D in some case, and like I wanted to make something that was like, so when I started writing this game was when JK Turfling started being a turf. So I was like, I wanted to create these schools in reaction to that, but I didn't want one school. I didn't want a Hogwarts. I didn't want something like that. I wanted to have several schools that all focused on different things and focused on different parts of, you know, the things that make D&D what it is.
Yeah.
And like, they're not the only schools in the country. There are other schools for people that want to do business, like normal things, except for business is a part of one of the super special schools that also does warrior stuff. Because it was like, why would you teach someone to be a mercenary if you can't teach them how to run a business too?
Yeah. They got to know that freelancing life.
Yeah, exactly. But I was just like, okay, so I want these schools. And I was like, okay, so what are the parts of D&D that exist? There's schools for enchantment. There's schools of druidry, sorcery. There's combat arts, there's divinity, there's like, who would teach these? And from that, the schools came to be, and I sort of designed them around the nature of what they had. Like, the most recent school that has been seen in the podcast is Lothmoran, the school of magic and enchantment, which is in a pocket dimension in a crystal castle. Castle made entirely of iridescent crystal. And then there's other schools like Hearthbound, which is it's Hearthbound seminary for the multi-dimensional faith. So they teach different faiths and different types of faith there to these different groups that will either be like, they can be sent by religious parents or they can become paladins, clerics, so on and so forth. Like, I was like, what do these look like? How are they shaped? What kind of culture would they have? What kind of people would want to work there or want to go there? What kind of people go there and don't want to go there or work there? Like, I just like, it's from asking yourself questions about why these things exist and how they exist is the way to like sort of get the answers that you need. It's very simple. Just look at something and go, why? Yep. Why the fuck? Why this?
Right. And I think that answers too, which is like, how heavy do you go into one thing or another? Well, if you're asking yourself why, and the answers are coming out to be nothing to do with your players, nothing to do with their stories, nothing to do with where the campaign is headed or what you're writing, then maybe that's just not where your efforts should be. That's a very quick and easy way to just be like, well, maybe this should just wait until it becomes relevant. And I have a, you know.
Don't throw it out, though.
Yeah, don't throw it out. Just like.
Throw anything, because you never know when they're going to become interested in it.
Yep.
Like Fast Times. Like, I've thrown the gods out to the players. They know they exist and stuff like that. And one of the players has very much latched on to that. So like, and like they could have not, and I could have just thrown that entire like plot line away. Like there's so many different things like, oh, that's another thing. When you have build what you also think you need to help your players create characters. So like give them enough backing in the world that they can create something that feels real, because like it can be very hard to create something when you don't know the premise of a game. Like people need like, not necessarily like guideposts, like they can't go, like it can go here, but they can't go here. Right. But mostly like a framing, so they know what they're building within. I like to make sure that like they have something to ground them in the campaign, so that when they create characters, like even if the characters go against the world, that's still in reaction to the world itself. Right. Like, and I want them to have that. So like, you want to make sure that you have enough to help your players also construct what they want to create within this world too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tal mentioned something like that too, that idea of listening to your players and like what they latch onto, and diving deeper into that and letting them write some of the world. That's actually the world building panel we hosted at PAX was one of the biggest things that all of the panelists talked about was this idea of like listening to your players, and to not railroad, you have to latch onto what they latch onto, and trust that process.
100%. And like I've gotten into that trap of like not listening before, like as a baby GM. Like it's a really easy trap to fall into. Don't do it. Yep. Just, you want the story. The story is not good without other people. If you're going to write something that you don't want anyone else's input in it, go write a book. Go write a TV show. Go write a novel. Don't write a TV show. You need input on that. But like, go do something else.
I can't imagine that with a giant world, 140 plus episodes, that you have made every ounce of everything in that world from scratch. What is the balance for pulling your content? Because this, I think, is where we'll get to talk a little bit about Kobold Press, which is, what are some of the things that you use to subsidize, right? To just like beef things out. Where is your time most useful?
I mean, I'll start off because I've got her picture right there. This is Agatha. She is a alehouse drake, which is straight from Toma Beasts, and not used as a monster in any way whatsoever. But I just got so enamored with the story that they put in there about the idea of these generational dragons that that basically are kind of like handed down from generation to generation in these taverns, and that they are sort of these fixtures. And I kind of wanted to have a friendly presence. Dear Agatha, sort of a little Miss Doubtfire-esque to her, but she's a big gossip. And the thing is she's from the time, but she's old, so she's from the time when magic was powerful and the rise of magic. And so a lot of the lore that I needed to convey to the players could be conveyed through a friend, your friendly local alehouse drake.
Yeah.
She became one of our favorite ones. I had art done of her, all this other sort of stuff of sort of that friendly presence, but also very knowledgeable, and the perfect little explanation point above her head quest giver for whatever new gossipy thing had happened, or one of the quick thing on world building again, having someone to break through the roadblocks that a bad die roll or something, or just even just, I mean, Lord knows as a DM I've forgotten to say something, and like, why aren't they getting this? It's like, did you hear me tell you whatever? You never said that. Okay, that was just in my head.
Okay.
But when you're to have someone that your players can go to, and don't just use monster manuals necessarily for something to fight and kill. There are so
absolutely
many amazing stat blocks for NPCs, for characters, for social encounters along the way. And I think one of the biggest things of why I got hooked on Toma Beast, Creature Codex, I mean, literally, they're like right here.
That makes me happy.
It's like literally, I mean, they stay next to the computer. It's like, actually my Midgard world book as well, which is another great place for building worlds and temples. And, if you want an area or a zone, it is when you need to answer those questions that we were talking about, when you're asking yourself those questions, Agatha, gotta think, well, what's the deal with alehouse drakes? Where'd they come from? Who are they? Are they, and it turned out that she actually, was more than just an alehouse drake. As the campaign went on, it grew that they found that she sort of had a secret past of who she used to be in her younger days. And so, like I said, I think that's one of the great things that I find, especially about Kobold stuff, is they give you so much more than just something to kill.
Yeah.
In a lot of their stats, they really flesh them out. And even if it is something to kill, in their, some of the most unique legendary actions, some of the biggest thing they did for me was, I saw, I was like, well, what if this is like a CR3 and it has a legendary action? That's crazy talk. And I was DMing for 6 and sometimes 7 players.
Yeah.
Just action economy. If I didn't have CR3s and CR4s with legendary actions, they wouldn't make it through a round, just because of the fact that the number of attacks that the players get. So I swear by it. I have them in hard copy. I have them in digital, so I can drag and drop them into my Roll20.
Yep.
Same.
I mean, I just used the Devil Shark the other day, reskin, and
that's a good one.
Anything underwater, the Devil Shark is so key.
To
have for underwater. But
what about you, Sephi?
Sorry. Yeah.
I want to talk about reskinning. No, don't apologize. I want to talk about reskinning for a bit, because I reskin stuff from the Toma Beast all the time. Don't just think that because you have this stat block with this monster with this specific name that you can't just be like, I need a different aesthetic. I need something that suits this campaign. The abilities work, but let's give them different flavor. Like, it's water flavored, let's make it shadows. If it's ice flavored, make it fire. Like, if it's an angel, you can totally turn into a fallen demon or something like that. Like, I reskin stuff all the time. In fact, and this is a little secret. So I have never released this information, but the actual stat block for one of the main introduced NPCs, Ned, who has an evil alternate form that people know, is the Death Jester.
Oh.
Full stat block is the Death Jester from the Tome of Beasts.
From Tome of Beasts,
and that should also let people know that when he first appears, he's toying with the party. He's just playing around. Like, he is a Death Jester. So, like,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, I love the Tome of Beasts. It's also like the Monster Manual. You know, it's great. It's straightforward, but like, I think there's a lot more to play with. There's a reason like that Kobold Press can keep making Beast Tomes and Creature Codex and Tomes of Beasts 2. Like, there's a lot of wiggle room for these creatures. The other thing too that I like about them is that even if you don't play D&D, you don't need to use their stat blocks. You can use the flavor text for them and help that fuel your other campaigns. It's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to get them, even if like it's not necessarily for 5e, because you may not be using the stat blocks, but you can use some of the flavor text to help with your other campaigns.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yep.
Very cool.
Well, and yes, I mean, reskinning is so key because so often, not even just know you need flavor, but you might need to adjust something. Again, if you've got 6 or 7 players, or I mean, if you were like me and gave them way too powerful magic items way too early because they were so darn cool, and then oh no, reskinning. And also, I mean, I'm a big fan of doing the old Pokemon merge. It's like, okay, I really like this action over here, but I kind of want it on this. You know what? I'm just gonna add that action right on the little fusion in there.
I've done that too.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, my Devil Shark was a corruption shark, and I gave them they had legendary reaction, where that if you did damage to it within 60 feet, it could immediately charge to your location and do an attack, which my range were very surprised.
I bet they were not happy with you.
Yeah. But it was, again, 6 level 10 players, all caster cannons, and I'm like, I gotta shut down some cannons. And the way you do that is they're like, I'm right at the very edge of my range, and not anymore.
No, you're not. Yeah, not anymore. Man, that's cool. Yeah, I found also that reskinning. There's a couple books by Kobold Press, like the bestiaries are obviously probably our #1 used GM tool to date. But I have recently started diving into our another series called our what are those called? The Grimoires, which are like a series of like. They're not essays because they're not written in first person, but they're like setting pieces. They're like 3 pages of like the feast halls of the dwarves. And it just talks about like the feast halls of the dwarves and like what you can expect. And then it might have like an NPC or something like that. Or they've got one book around like the cults in the area. And I just don't have time to always come up with my own cults or, my own stuff. And I love pulling from other people's great ideas.
That was the other book that was next to yours. Like because I use Midgard is. So,
I was gonna say you got the limited edition cover. You so special.
Because
mine is not that pretty.
Because I love it. But no, I mean they do all this type of stuff. I can't even tell you the times I'm pulled a faction or whatever, and it's heck, even like the fact that all their I'm a details guy. It's like the fact that all of them have like the crest and heraldry and all that type of stuff. So, because it's gonna be like you walk in and there's a crest on the wall. What's the crest look like? Oh,
crap! I forgot about that. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like the bane of my existence.
The other thing too is that reskinning does not just exist for monsters. You can reskin. There was a supplement that went along with the Creature Codex, like the layers.
Yeah, the Creature Codex layers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like, you can take those and like, I'm not always the best. Like when I want to create puzzles for games, I want to create actual puzzles, and like actual traps that they need to solve, which isn't always the best thing for recorded media. So like having those and being like, oh, it's this is much faster, because I'm one of those GMs who in a homebrew game I've created puzzle encounters for players, like Uncharted style puzzle encounters with no monsters whatsoever. Doesn't always come across the best on recorded media. They're fun.
It's true.
But like I can't do that, and I know that I will do it if I'm left to my own devices. So I reskin that shit all the time.
Well, I think that's actually a very perfect segue to our last question of the day before we close out, which is a very interesting one. So when you're making these worlds, when you're putting your tables together, when you're doing the process, what goes into the decision on choosing the sharing medium? Podcast versus video streaming versus home game? Does any of that, because Tall does a lot of streaming. Actually, Sephi, you do too, but your homebrew world ended up in a podcast. Was that a want to make a podcast, or did you feel like the story would lend itself better to the medium?
I can answer this very, very bluntly.
Yes.
Streaming media is easier than creating a podcast.
Yes, it is.
When you do a podcast right. The reason that we chose to do a podcast was because we wanted editing, we wanted it clean, we wanted full production values with music, sound effects, the whole 9 yards. And we wanted to make sure that what we were creating was a completely polished product. And like when you do that, it's like, yeah, the impetus is improv and this created like sort of collaborative story effort, but the end product that people observe is not that. It is a polished creation of that. Like we don't re-record entire sessions, but we do retakes if the audio doesn't gets messed up, or if something needs to be clearer. Like we are role playing to create a show, and then we create a show from it.
Yeah.
Whereas with recorded media, and this is not to say that streaming media is inferior, it's great. But stream media, you're going to get a more raw idea of what it is. You're going to get actual D&D. You're going to get actual tabletop, which is, like Critical Role. Like that is D&D at its raw form.
It's live.
Like, that's why it takes forever.
Yeah.
But I and a lot of the people that are associated with my podcast have ADHD, and we absorb edited media better. And also, like, we create our podcast, we use a lot of like musical cues and sound cues as a way to sort of keep attention, which we don't talk about that often, but it's something that we sort of innately do. Like we'll have a sound cue here where there's like a note that there needs to be one, or here, or here, or here. So it keeps it easier to makes it easier to keep attention, even though these are very long episodes. So like, it also, and it sort of helps with accessibility in that way, but like we're doing it selfishly, largely for ourselves. And I think it creates a more entertaining product. Like, and that's not to say not entertaining, easy to sit through.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a digestibility.
Yeah. The other thing too is that like I'm about to say this is probably mean. Like, I don't think a lot of people who stream take advantage of a lot of the things that they can do to make those sort of things happen. Like most of the games that I've played online don't take advantage of music. They don't take advantage of sound cues. You can do that stuff on the fly. Whenever I run a game online streaming, I always do that shit. Like I have to. And that's a good way to build immersion and stuff like that. And like that can help people pay attention too on top of it all.
Yeah.
And like there's great royalty free stuff. Like video game stuff you can stream video game music on Twitch without getting DCMA'd. There's also stuff that's specifically made for that, like Kevin MacLeod and David Fesley and stuff. So like, I don't know. As a listener, I prefer podcasts. From a logistics standpoint, I much prefer streaming.
Yeah, you sound like me. What about you, Tal? Now, I know you use a lot of music, a lot of sound cues, a lot of like planned immersion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's just two entirely different things. Having been in a podcast just as a player in Turncloaks, and there was one or two episodes where because of they weren't able to be. I took on editing for them, and just like afterwards, oh my god,
my brain, my brain,
crazy. But
hired an editor for a reason.
Yep.
Oh yeah. But for streaming, the big thing I would agree that so many people don't get to take advantage of it. I am a huge proponent of. I mean, I tell you, my prep, especially now since a lot of my world stuff is settled. I've kind of know what the episode. But I tell you, I spend probably equal time actual doing notes and mechanics planning as I do actually picking out the soundtrack that I'm going to live mix Yeah, I know, right? It brings so much.
I'm all into the voices right now, like the overlays, like making myself sound like a monster or sound like a beautiful princess, and not like a southern woman.
Some of us don't need overlays to do that. So.
I mean, technically, I have the voices too, but it sure does make things a lot easier.
It does make things a lot easier.
It's so much fun sometimes too, or to queue up, like I have a character that has a goat familiar, and it's really nice to just like have a goat sound, so I don't have to make the mouth noises. It's really nice.
No, it's great. Absolutely. I was just teasing. I was being shady.
What Steph is trying to say is get better, Dot. Like, do better. Just do better. No, I'm just playing.
I'm just trying to say that maybe you could do better. Maybe just a little.
It's awesome. So, okay. Well, there is only because we're at time, because I could sit here and just listen to y'all talk about your games and your process forever. But I can't because I have to let you go. But I do want you to tell everybody where they can find all these amazing projects that you're working on, things that are coming to the forefront. If you have upcoming projects you can talk about. I know that's always like iffy because NDAs are a thing. But talk about what you're working on and where people can find your stuff, because I imagine that they will want to. Why don't we go backwards?
Okay.
You first.
You can find me as at Tallsquall pretty much across all social media. I got lucky and no one else has that name other than a Land's End coat that comes in a tall size, and it's a squall coat. So you're either got me or Land's End site pretty much. But you can find me all over social media for The Vice, which is totally in the can, but every episode is available out on my YouTube channel. You can watch the evolution of a stream from really raw episode one. I'm very proud of certainly our last our even 2/3 of the way in. I kind of figured out how to do the streaming and juggle all the things. Not that I didn't still make mistakes like on the finale with stuff.
It happens with streams.
Oh yeah. And then as far as live goes, you can catch me on Tuesday nights, again, starting up in January as we jump back into the last voyage of the Whale's Whiskers. I'm not sure if voting's still open, but if it is, go check out TTRPG Gifts, because they're running a whole thing for lots of great moments from a bazillion different streams that are out there. And so check that out to support the community. And I eventually, probably like 2 or 3 years out, I am putting together a world book called The Eras of Valor that will be to a whole sort of interesting twist on the concept of a world book where you don't necessarily play a single character from 1 to 20, that you play multiple characters through different eras, and that the binding thing is the world for the different characters, and sort of as a more generational type idea that big things happen once a generation or every couple generations, and that your players' characters are involved in those over the course of several thousand years in the life of the world.
Cool. That's very cool. What about you, Sephi? Where can we find you? What you busy working on?
So you can find me at Persephiroth everywhere. Although I did recently find out there are now other Persephiroth accounts. They were made very recently, and I assume why. There's another Persephiroth on Twitch. Apparently, I was searching for my name the other day because I need to download some of my VODs with Twitch Leecher, and I was like, oh, that's new. But yeah, at Persephiroth on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. There's nothing on YouTube, but there will be later if you like Pokemon content. But you can find my podcast at Fast Times D, the letter N D, on Twitter, or Fast Times D&D, that's D, the letter N D.com. We are currently in hiatus, but we plan to restart again in March. There's quite a few episodes, lots of hours of content for you to listen to, so go and check that out. As far as future things, I can't talk about them, but I do have a few things lined up, and I'm very, 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 very excited. One should be announced soon at some point, but yeah.
Awesome.
That's me.
Remember, everybody, if a link in chat doesn't work, all things have a search function. Go search it. You are a capable, possibly not human, I'll just say a capable folk. All right, thanks everybody for being here. I'm Little Red Dot. I'm your resident Kobold Press Twitch producer. I'm about to hit my holiday break. What up? We'll be back next week. I hope you all have a fantastic holiday no matter how you spend it. Happy Yule to all of you that reigned in the winter solstice yesterday. And if you are braving family and food, may the gods be with you. Luck. Yeah, best of luck. May the gods be with you. I encourage you to, remain grounded and find some joy in a time that is supposed to be all about joy. And don't fret, we will be back next week for both another Kobold Chats on Wednesday the 29th. That will actually be with Mythmatic, talking all about his homebrew world for Table Story. It's a really good conversation. We pre-recorded. Sorry, we'll be coming to you from the past. And then
you should definitely go listen to it because Mythmatic is awesome.
Myth is so good. And he has a lot of incredible things to say about like world building, specifically about the balance between him and what his players bring to the table. So that's going to be a really great conversation. And our continuation of Empire of the Ghouls, Tuesday night, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, will continue. We are going to take this week off, but we'll be back next week. So we hope to see all of you there. Same Kobold time, same Kobold channel. Enjoy your holidays, and don't do anything a kobold wouldn't do. All right, everybody, have a good one.